In the 19th century, many working-class people in Britain and Ireland's towns and cities lived a precarious existence, barely earning enough money to pay the rent, let alone buy food and clothing. Oftentimes, poor Victorians lived in rented, foul and fetid single rooms, in tenements, furnished with the most rudimentary of furniture, surrounded by filth and frequently plagued by vermin, if they could afford even that. For your family was quickly turned out onto the streets if the landlord went without a day's payment. Multiplied over and over, these cramped and overcrowded hovels became slums. London, being the most populous city, had many that came and went over decades. Some comprised so many streets, courts and alleys, and became so notorious for crime, vice and destitution that they were infamous city-wide, such as St. Giles. But there were many other pockets of poverty hidden away behind avenues and terraces, out of sight and out of mind of the well-to-do. Such poor and unsanitary living conditions were simply horrible. In a time before public health control and housing standards, the poor had little choice but to accept whatever accommodation they could get. Today, in an account by the Victorian journalist George Sims, you will discover the depth of poverty he witnessed as he makes a journey into London's slums, what he calls London's Povertyopolis. Sims was a social reformer with an interest in the plight of London's poor. He doesn't tell us where these streets are, into which he travels, perhaps so as not to reveal the identity of those he interviewed. You will discover a world where some men and women were so poor that their worldly possessions comprised no more than the rags on their back and perhaps a battered old kettle. Poverty was a joyless existence, a daily struggle to find enough money to pay the rent, buy bread, and avoid the workhouse or a night on the cold, hard streets, whilst numbing the pain and misery of life in the oblivion of drink. Before we move on, if you're interested in history like this, and you want to find out more about what life was really like for people in the past, please consider subscribing for more content. If you'd like to support what we make for you, check out the description for links to ways you can help us continue bringing the past alive. I cannot help being struck in my wanderings through Povertyopolis that one room in this district is very like the other. The family likeness of the chairs and tables is truly remarkable, especially in the matter of legs. Most chairs are born with 4 legs, but the chairs one meets with here are a 2-legged race. A 4-legged chair is a rara avis, and when found, should be made a note of. The tables, too, are of a type indigenous to the spot. The survival of the fittest does not obtain in these districts in the matter of tables. The most positively unfit are common, very common objects. What has become of the fittest I hesitate to conjecture. Possibly they have run away. I am quite sure that a table with legs would make use of them to escape from such surroundings. As to the bedsteads, they are wretched, broken-down old things of wood and iron that look as though they had been rescued a little late from a fire, then used for a barricade, afterwards buried in volcanic eruption, and finally dug out of a dust heap that had concealed them for a century. The bedding, a respectable coal sack would blush to acknowledge even as a poor relation. I have enumerated chairs, tables, and beds, not because they are found in every poor home. There are several rented rooms which can boast of nothing but 4 walls, a ceiling, and a floor, but because these articles placed in one of these dens constitute what are euphemistically called furnished apartments, a species of accommodation with which all very poor neighbourhoods abound. The furnished apartments fetch as much as 10 pence a day, and are sometimes occupied by 3 or 4 different tenants during a week. The deputy comes for the money every day, and it is pay or go with the occupants. If the man who has taken one of these furnished rooms for his home sweet home, does not get enough during the day to pay his rent, out he goes into the street with his wife and children, and enter another family forthwith. The tenants have not, as a rule, much to be flung after them in the shape of goods and chattels. The clothes they stand upright in, a battered kettle, and, perhaps, a bundle, make up the catalogue of their worldly possessions. The kind of rough and ready lodging is the resource of thousands of industrious people earning precarious livelihoods, and they rarely rise above it to the dignity of taking a room by the week. The great struggle is to get over Saturday, and thank God for Sunday. Sunday is a free day, and no deputy comes to disturb its peaceful calm. The Saturday's rent, according to the custom of the country, makes the tenant free of the apartments until Monday. It is the custom to denounce the poor as thriftless, and that they are so, I grant. The temptation to trust to luck and let every day take care of itself is, it must be remembered, great. Life with them is always a toss-up, a daily battle, an hourly struggle. Thousands of them can never hope to be 5 shillings ahead of the world if they keep honest. The utmost limit of their wage is reached when they have paid their rent, kept themselves and their horribly large families from starvation, and bought the few rags which keep their limbs decently covered. With them the object of life is attained when the night's rent is paid, and they do not have to hesitate between the workhouse or a corner of the staircase in some doorless house. There is a legend in one street, I know of, a man who once saved £0.50 and lost it through a hole in his pocket. The moral of that legend may have impressed itself upon the whole population and discouraged thrift for evermore. But be that as it may, the general rule is, what you make in a day, spend in a day. It is needless to add that this precept brings its practisers perpetually within measurable distance of absolute pennilessness. They live and die on the confines of it. I am wrong. They invariably die on the wrong side of the border, and are buried at somebody else's expense. Drink is the curse of these communities. But how is it to be wondered at? The gin palaces flourish in the slums, and fortunes are made out of men and women who seldom know where tomorrow's meal is coming from. Can you wonder that the gaudy gin palaces, with their light and their glitter, are crowded? Drink is sustenance to these people. Drink gives them the Dutch courage necessary to go on living. Drink dulls their senses and reduces them to the level of the brutes they must be to live in such sties. The gin palace is heaven to them compared to the hell of their pestilent homes. A copper or two, often obtained by pawning the last rag that covers the shivering children on the bare floor at home, will buy enough vitriol madness to send a woman home so besotted that the wretchedness, the anguish, the degradation that await her there have lost their grip. To be drunk with these people means to be happy. Sober, God help them! How could they be aught but wretched? There is not only temptation to drink wrought by the fearful surroundings of the poor. A positive craving for it is engendered by the foul and fetid atmosphere they continually breathe. I have often wondered that the advocates of temperance, with the immense resources of wealth and organization they command, have not given more attention to the overcrowding and the unsanitary condition of the dwellings of the poor, as one of the great causes of the abuse of stimulants. It is not only that crime and vice and disorder flourish luxuriantly in these colonies, through the dirt and discomfort bred of intemperance of the inhabitants, but the effect upon the children is terrible. The offspring of drunken fathers and mothers come into the world physically and mentally unfit to conquer in life's battle. The wretched child object one comes upon in these localities is the most painful part of our explorer's experience. The county asylums are crowded with paupers, who owe their wretched condition to the sin of the parents, and the rates are heavily burdened with the maintenance of the offspring of drunkenness. The drink dulls every sense of shame, takes the sharp edge from sorrow, and leaves the drinker for a while in a fool's paradise. Here is the home of the most notorious drunkardess, if I may coin a work, in the neighbourhood. Mrs. O'Flanagan's room is easily entered, for it is on the street level, and one step brings us into the presence of the lady herself. She is in bed. A dirty red flannel rag is wrapped about her shoulders, and her one arm is in a sling. She sits up in bed at the sight of visitors, and greets us in a gin and fog voice, slightly mellowed with the Irish brogue. Having been charged at the police court 75 times with being drunk, she is therefore a celebrated character. She is hardly sober now, though she has evidently had a shaking which would have sobered most people for a month. Her face is a mass of bruises and cuts, and every now and then a groan and a cry to certain saints in her calendar tell of aches and pains in the limbs, concealed under the dirty blanket that covers the bed. "I'm a pretty sight now, ain't I, gentlemen dear?" she says, with a foolish laugh. "Sure, and I got blind drunk again last Saturday, and they run me in. The inspector let me out o' Sunday. God bless him for a rare gentleman. They carried me on a stretcher, bless your hearts, and I kicked. Ha ha ha!" The woman positively yelled with laughter as she thought of the scene she caused and the trouble she gave the police. Suddenly she looks round as if in search of something. "Molly, you young varmint, where are you?" she shouts, and presently from under the bed, where the child lay crouching in fear, she drags a wretched little girl of 7 or 8, with her face and head covered with sores that make one shudder to look at them. "There, Molly, you young varmint, show yourself to their honours, will you?" The child begins to snivel. One of our number is the board school officer of the district, and Molly has not been to school lately. Mrs. O'Flanagan explains. "You see, I can't use my limbs just yet, your honour, and Molly, Lord love her, she's just the only thing I got to look after me. I might be burned in my blessed bed, your honour, and not able to move." "You should give up getting drunk," I ventured to suggest. "Then you wouldn't want a nurse." "You're right, your honour. 'Tis the drink. You see, I can't help it. I ain't been sober for 5 years. Ha ha! And it's all through the trouble has come to me. My boy got into bad company and got lagged and put away for 10 years, and I've never been the same since. And it broke my heart. And I took to the drink. And now my old man's took to the drink through aggravation o' me, and he gets drunk every night of his blessed life." The woman's story is practically true. Before her trouble, she and her husband were costermongers and hawkers of fruit. The first of the evils of the foul slums, where honest workers are forced to live, fell upon them in the ruin of the boy reared in a criminal atmosphere. The vicious surroundings were too strong for him, and he became a thief and paid the penalty. The mother sees her son, idolized in her rough way, taken from her. The den of her home becomes doubly wretched, and the cursed drink fiend is invoked to charm the sorrow away. That is the first step, to drown sorrow. The steps after that are easy to count. The woman becomes an habitual drunkard. The rooms they live in get dirtier and smaller and fouler, and at last the husband drowns his sorrow too. Aggravation and a constant association with a drunken woman turn the poor fellow to evil ways. Himself and the whole family are wrecked, that under better circumstances might have been good and useful citizens. Had these people been able to get a decent room among decent people, the first misfortune that sent them wrong might never have happened. Their case is the case of hundreds. Of drinking shops there are plenty in these places. Of eating houses or shops for the sale of food, very few. So rare are the latter that when we come to one in a dirty, tumble-down street, we stop and examine the contents of the window. I don't know whether to call it a tart shop, a baker's, or a dripping emporium. There seems to be a little bit of each about it, and half a rice pudding, and a ham bone on which a blue bottle has gone to sleep, tired out, perhaps, with looking for the meat, give it the faintest suspicion of being an eating-house. There is also in the window a dilapidated bloater, smoked herring, which looks as though it had been run over by an omnibus many years ago. It is while taking notes of the contents of this tempting emporium of luxuries that we become aware of a very powerful perfume. It seems to rise from beneath where we are standing, and used as we are by this time to the bouquets of the East, we involuntarily step back and contort the muscles of our faces. Then we see that we have been standing on a grating. Peering down, we can just see into a gloomy little room. To the opened window presently there comes a man in his shirt-sleeves, and looks up at us. His face is deadly white, the eyes are sunken, the cheekbones hollow, and there is a look in his face that says more plainly than the big ticket of the blind impostor, "I am starving." Starving down below there, with only a thin floor between himself and the ham bone, the ancient herring, the rice pudding, and the treacle tarts. As the noisome effluvia rises and steams through the grating, we begin to appreciate the situation. This food shop is directly over the cellar which gives the odour forth. Pleasant for the customers, certainly. We determine to push our investigation still further, and presently we are down in the cellar below. The man in his shirt-sleeves, we can guess where the coat is, receives us courteously. His wife apologizes for the wretched condition of the room. Both of them speak with that unmistakable timbre of voice, which betokens a smattering of education. In the corner of the room is a heap of rags. That is the bed. There are 2 children, a boy and a girl, sitting on a bare hearth, and gazing into the fast-dying embers of a wretched fire. Furniture the room has absolutely none, but a stool roughly constructed of 3 pieces of unplaned wood nailed together. 4 shillings a week is the rent of the cellar below the pie shop. The foul smell arises from the gradual decay of the basement and the utter neglect of all sanitary precautions. The man, who has only 1 arm, is out of work this week, he tells us, but he is promised a job next. To tide over till then is a work of some difficulty, but the sticks and the wardrobe of the family have paid the rent up to now. As to meals, well, they ain't got much appetite. The stench in which they live effectually destroys that. In this instance, even bad drainage has its advantages, you see. Before the man lost his arm, he was a clerk. Without a right hand, he is not much good as a penman in a competitive market. So he goes on as timekeeper in a buildings yard, as a messenger, or as anything by which he can get a few shillings for a living. The children have not been to school. Why? Asks the officer who accompanies us. Because they've no boots, and they are both ill now. It is true. The children, pale, emaciated little things, cough a hard, rasping cough from time to time. To show us how bad they are, they set up a perfect paroxysm of coughing until the mother scolds them, and inquires how they expect the gentleman to hear himself speak if they kick up that row. The children's boots have gone with the father's coat, and at present it does not seem hard to say that the parents must be fined unless the children come barefooted through the sloppy streets to school. Such, however, is the rule, and this boot question is an all-important one in the compulsory education of the children of the slums. How to get the boots for Tommy and Sarah to go their daily journey to the board school is a problem which 1 or 2 unhappy fathers have settled by ending it all behind the domestic door. The difficulties which the poor have in complying with the demands of the Education Act are quite unsuspected by the general public. Parental excuses for non-attendance are made at a meeting at which the parents have been noticed for the non-attendance of their children to adduce what reasons they can why they should not be summoned before a magistrate. Mothers and fathers tell their own tale, and a few statistics. I fancy will be a revelation to many who are at present in sublime ignorance of how the poor live.